your name and your email, right? How many more new members? Men are welcome. Sorry, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We also have a Facebook page, Pierce College Feminist Club, I believe, right?
Yeah, Pierce Feminist Club.
There
We
you
have a
go.
Facebook, a Tumblr, we'll eventually have a Twitter, everything. So, yeah, socially media.
Any questions?
Okay, so.
All right, shall we begin?
Yeah.
Well, let's start by talking about what feminism is. Why don't we do that? A lot of my students are afraid to call themselves feminists because they think, as I think we talked about this yesterday or the day before, it means, women who don't shave their legs, women who hate men, and it's not. That's not what it is. Actually, if you look at the Equal Rights Amendment, it's a really basic, very should have passed amendment that just says, women should be treated equal to men. If you think women should be treated equally to men, you are a feminist. Ding, ding, ding. So it's really that basic. But let's go around and talk about, what it means.
Well, I've been identifying as a feminist since I was like 12 years old. I think my mom's a feminist. A lot of my aunts are feminists. And for me, it's something very personal as well as political. It's just an act of believing that you are equal to men and you can do whatever you want to do, and that you don't have to worry about, it's so hard. You don't have to worry about what your goals are, and you don't have to adjust them to what society dictates, and you can still be a feminist and shave your legs. Like, my legs are freshly shaved, and I wear a bra and I wear makeup, and that doesn't negate the fact that I'm a feminist at all. Part of feminism is loving yourself and accepting your body as it is, and it's something very, it's like a form of self-love, I guess, and loving our fellow sisters and our brothers as well. And patriarchy hurts men too. Patriarchy hurts men and feminism helps men.
Why don't you tell them what patriarchy is?
Patriarchy is the system we live in. It's a male-dominated society, so we live in a patriarchal society. We live in a male-dominated society. That's my personal view.
So for me, feminism is very aspirational. So what that means to me is that I don't know that I'm ever going to get to a place where I'm, reach the holy ground of being a good feminist. And it's similarly, I don't ever think there's such a thing as being a bad feminist. For me, being a feminist and trying to live towards feminist ideals is trying to work every day to make sure that no one, male or female, feels limited by their sex. That men don't feel like they have to be strong all the time or tough or not show emotion, and similarly that women don't feel that they have to necessarily always be nurturing or that their worth is based on what they look like. There are days where I am not living the most feminist life. There are other days where I wake up and I feel really empowered to go out and be my best, most feminist self, and where I want to do my best to help other women and men feel empowered to live their best lives and not feel limited by their gender either. I was actually on a panel about the war on women last week in the West Hollywood area, and it was a bunch of older women primarily in the audience, and they were so dismayed by the popularity of the Kardashians. Like, they really felt like the world was a sign that things were going down the wrong path because the Kardashians are so popular. And I love Colleen Lamar so much. And I just don't feel like there's any, I think we have to kind of let go of the idea that there's a certain vision of feminism or a certain picture of what it is to be a feminist, because there are many of us who work every day for women's equality, but we go home to relationships that are far less than equal. And similarly, there are many women who are carrying their families and supporting their families, including their partners, but they work in jobs where they're paid less than men who are doing the same job. And so I think we have to kind of let go of this very rigid idea of feminism and embrace all forms of feminism in every part of our lives.
In my Women in Politics class, we were studying different types of feminism, and it's interesting. One of our students made a presentation about Phyllis Schlafly, who's still active in the anti-woman movement. I mean, she recently wrote a letter talking about not reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. The Violence Against Women Act, a very basic act that's really important so that women feel free to report domestic violence. There's a provision that says if you're brought in as a mail order bride, or now it's internet order bride, there's Russian women that men who can't get laid here have to use. And they go online, they pick out a bride, and she comes out here. And sometimes men abuse these women, and the Violence Against Women Act says don't worry about being deported because they're afraid to report it. They don't want to get deported. So it says instead of getting deported, this protects you. If someone brings you here to marry you, pays for you, and then beats you, you don't have to be afraid to report it. And there are many women, like Phyllis Schlafly, who would like to get rid of that portion of the Violence Against Women Act. So there are women, and her life was a testimony to feminism. She was a lawyer when no one else was a lawyer. She had all kinds of things that she did that most women did not do. It was an amazing life. So there are women that I think are feminists who work against feminism, which is also really strange. But I think it's very important now for all of us to stand up and say we are feminists, because this is a war against women. Right now, there are, and I'm sure Sarita will talk about this. There are many states that are trying to limit not just abortion, but access to birth control, sex education. It's violence, preventing violence, preventing domestic violence. It's gotten so twisted. I've never seen anything like this in my life or in my career. So I think it's time for people to stand up and say that they support women's rights at a time when women are really under attack.
I take a slightly different view of feminism. One, I'm a man, and so I have to be very careful, I think, about what I say when it comes to feminism. Partly because we do live in a patriarchal society, and I have to realize that I was raised in that patriarchal society. And in spite of the fact that I was raised by a mother who went to college and raised me around women's studies programs and philosophy departments and things of that sort, so I was raised to be a feminist in some ways. But I realized that I didn't start taking feminism seriously until probably about 10 years ago, when I was having a conversation with some graduate students in philosophy up in San Francisco. And it really wasn't, and I'm really ashamed to say this now, it wasn't until other men told me about how they were patriarchal, about how they were misogynistic, and how essentially they were dismissing women, right, in their day-to-day activities. And it wasn't until men told me this. Even though I was raised for 25, 30 years by a feminist woman, and I knew all the arguments, I read all the arguments in college and in graduate school, I knew all of them. But I didn't take it seriously until other men told me about it, until other men actually accepted it as well, right? I might be ashamed of that, but that's the reality. If we want to get over and actually have feminism progress, if we want justice to progress, we have to be honest about ourselves, and about our histories, and about our constructions and our realities. So feminism to me, the essential characteristic of feminism, I would say, is not that women are equal, but that we are not defined by our sexual characteristics. That we are individuals, that we have a self, an I, a soul, I'm a philosopher, sorry, right? A mind, whatever it is you want to call it. But what does not define us is our sexual characteristics. I don't accept the gender binary, that there's only man and woman, so I have to be very careful when I say these types of things, right? Because there are more than just man or woman, both sexually as well as in gender, because those are two different things. So feminism to me is not just a desire and a belief to end sexism, but as a man, it's an active participation in ending sexism. So part of it could be on, speaking out on panels like this, showing up and at demonstrations and rallies where I need to be, going to clinic defense when people are trying to block abortion clinics, not voting for people who are cutting Planned Parenthood, right? Those are really important things that I can do as well. So I think we'll get into a little bit more of the details today. So,
I do agree that I feel that in order to call yourself a feminist, one, you do have to believe that women should have equal rights to men. Okay? I think it is important to think of this distinction. That doesn't mean that everyone literally is equal. Kobe's a better basketball player than most. But you should have equal rights to have those opportunities that men do and so on. So I do agree with that. I also do agree that to be a feminist, you kind of have to be doing something to sit there and help women get equal rights. And I think that sometimes the problem with talking to groups of men and women about feminism is we like to sit there and make men feel like they're not being ostracized and having their fingers pointed at them. And I think that that's the wrong approach to kind of take, because I think the truth of the matter is sometimes we need to be pointed at us. I mean, I'm a man and I have male privilege. Okay, I accept that I have male privilege. Whether I want it or not, that privilege is always going to be there for me. I don't have to ask for it; it's going to be given to me. One of the ways that it's given to me as a man when I talk about sexism, my voice gets privileged in the room. Some of my female colleagues, when they talk about sexism in sociology, they get dismissed as soon as they open their mouth and put the word sex out there. And it starts going with ism. If they just talk about sex, it's okay, but once you talk about ism, okay, then at that point, then people just shut them off. And I know my voice is privileged in that space. And that's one of the things, to accept that. Also, I have a lot of male privilege within the society itself. Some of it I notice and I do something about, some of it I don't notice, and some of it I will even choose to ignore at times. And I think there is such thing as a bad feminist. I hate to say it, or someone who shouldn't be called a feminist. I ran into a young man like this who was going into the sociology program, and he said, I'm a feminist, and what I want to do is I want to talk about his first year in the PhD program there. He says, I want to do something about how men can give back their privilege. Well, the first thing is to even make that statement shows that you don't even understand what privilege is, because the ability to give something back is a privilege women don't have in this case, So, and on top of that, he's not going to always notice when his privilege is there. 2 years later, he's the biggest chauvinist in his department. Treats women like crap and they hate him. Okay, and I can see why, because he's unaware of his own privilege. So I think the first step is for all of us as men to get over ourselves, take a little criticism, and accept that we do it.
I think also within feminism, we also need to be careful that we're not ostracizing people of color, people outside of the gender binary, people who are a lower class. Because feminism, well, the second wave especially, was very much a white upper middle class cisgender, which means that cisgender essentially means that your gender matches your sex as opposed to being transgender. So the second wave movement with Gloria Steinem and all of that was very much for white upper middle class women. So now with third wave feminism, or maybe it's fourth wave, I don't know, we're in like a weird flex right now. But we need to be careful and we need to be more intersectional in our approach. We need to also not cut out our sisters of color, our people who don't have like the ability to be able to go to protests because they have to work for a living, or people who aren't able-bodied to be able to go to protests to make a living. We need to not just talk from a white woman's perspective. We need to also not shut out women of color. We need to also, in grad schools, we need to read female authors like Bell Hooks, as well as Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan. So we need to be careful of that as well. And within feminism, we need to accept like our white privilege as well as our class privilege and all of that as well.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. If you think about feminists in the 50s, one of the big complaints they had is, we're so bored, we want to go to work. We don't want to just sit around and have people take care of our children all day. And black women would say, what are you talking about? Really? You're bored and you want to work? You know what? We're working. We are working and we're not even able to watch our own children. We're busy watching your children. So that's a huge difference between feminist meetings, and it was that way in the suffragette movement too, because a lot of the suffragists, a lot of the women who were working on getting the right to vote for women were also involved in the abolition movement, trying to end slavery. But the experiences of slave women were not the same as white women of privilege who just wanted the right to vote. In fact, they almost don't understand what the other is talking about. It's a completely different world. So feminism has many, many faces, and it still does today.
that's kind of one of the things I was talking about with the essential characteristic of what feminism is the idea that you have to be against sexism. But I think there's a lot of secondary characteristics of feminism. Feminism, I don't think allows for room for things like homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia. I don't accept that there's racism allowed as part of feminism. And so can you be a bad feminist? Absolutely. You're being inconsistent with what your rational thought process, which is the foundation for your feminism in the first place. The idea that this group, for whatever reason, whatever that group is, should be in control or should have power over this other group over here. That is unacceptable. That is fundamentally unacceptable. What I think feminism does is that it at least recognizes that who's in power right now, men, right? And who's not in power, women, right? But you know, there's a lot of other aspects about those men who are in power. One, we're white, right? We're often born in Western societies, the United States, right? We are often educated. So there's all of these kinds of privileges that we have. We're wealthy. The wealth, by the way, which was stolen from the global South, that's a different family, right? Right? But that is the reality. Right? That is the reality. So I think it's a secondary characteristic, and what ends up being the foundation for feminism is to get over this idea that this group, whoever this group is somehow morally justified in controlling everybody else, right? And it doesn't really matter if this group is to be white, if it's male, if it's American, if it's rich, if it's educated. It doesn't matter any of that, right? Fundamentally, I think what's going to end up happening is that we have to embrace and say all of that is wrong, right? And once we do that, then we can form that kind of movement, which is going to end all of it, right? So I think we have to be rational and consistent.
I totally agree with that. I think that right now, like in this generation, we live in a world where you don't really, like, yes, some people are personal, some people are like most races and color, but a lot of people don't. The laws are equal for like racism and stuff like that. But I do believe that the main focus, and like you said, even a man's voice is more powerful, and that is because that's all we know. I mean, girls like pink because, I mean, you were given pink when you were little, and that's not your fault. That's not anyone's fault, and if you like that, that shouldn't be something bad. I think the problem with me and feminism is that a lot of feminists believe that we have to be masculine, and I just don't agree with that because I love to be feminine. I don't agree that a woman cannot be taken seriously like Sarah Palin because she's hot. And, you know, another woman that's
One of the
masculine.
reasons she can't be taken seriously.
Because that's the point. It's just a lot of women, like you said, they go up like in front of a huge audience and they're just looked on as objects. And the reason is because this is what I believe, and I totally agree with you. Men are so conditioned. We are conditioning men. We can't show a lot of our body parts. You know, in school, you have dress code. I was in a Catholic private school. You can't like wear your skirt like higher than your knee. And that is because we're conditioning them because they're like powerful. Like you can't tempt men because they're gonna hurt you. And living in a fearful society is not okay. I mean, we were in a protest the other day, I think, against sexual assault. And there was a poster and it said, I wish I could go naked in a field and sleep there like and not be afraid of my life. Because we can't do that. I mean, a woman cannot just be naked or just show her body at least exposed because she is in fear of getting hurt. And that's where it's different because men, like biologically, have different bodies, they're stronger. But I think that living now in strength is not so valued. I think we should focus more on our minds and say that we can do it. The reason we cannot do it, a lot of women say that they can't, is because we're not given the opportunity. Because you know what, like in order for you to get your degree, to get your master's degree, let's say, and to be a doctor, which is mostly a male majority of the profession, you have to choose like between having children or, you know, like fulfilling your dreams. And that choice, like that's so unfair. I think that's just, you know, that's another reason we live in a man world. And all the rules are like perfect and easy for men. But for women, it's just harder and tougher. And I think that women who are in power and they show that they can, they're smart, and they're actually making the laws. Men would take women seriously because they're actually chasing an authority figure, and like men who are mostly the authority figures of women, and that's what we grow up with.
I did want to mention that I did have a baby while I was my PhD, but it was largely because I have a husband who is a 50-50 partner, who actually, he watches the baby a little bit more than I do, which enables me to come here. But it can be done, but you do need a feminist in your home.
It's interesting because, so obviously working at Planned Parenthood, a lot of the work that I do is around women's health, and usually when we say women's health, it's kind of like using for sexual health. And